For those of you who may be unfamiliar with who Tim Lambesis is, he was the lead singer of a metalcore band called As I Lay Dying. Now, while they were often described as a Christian band, As I Lay Dying isn't generally considered as such because their music and lyrics aren't overtly Christian, although the members of the band were very vocal about their Christianity. Now, Lambesis was arrested in May of 2013 on charges of soliciting a hitman to have his wife killed, and since then he's been sentenced to 6 years in prison for the crime. Now, nothing about this is particularly noteworthy except for the fact that Lambesis agreed to an interview with Alternative Press magazine in the days leading up to his sentencing. In this interview, Lambesis claimed that he lost his Christian faith and became an atheist during the period of his life which culminated in his arrest. Now, my intent here is not to make a no true Scotsman argument over whether or not Tim Lambesis actually lacked a belief in God or was just claiming to have been an atheist, but rather my intent is to question his atheism based upon his own explanations and behaviors. In addition, his beliefs at the time of the crime are irrelevant, since religion or a lack of belief in deities did not motivate his actions. It is not of any importance. So I'm neither claiming that he was a Christian bent on murder or an atheist with the same intentions, because evil is a human problem, not a religious one, and his beliefs simply were not a motivating factor in his crime. Now, in explaining his behavior during the time that he fell away from Christianity, Lambesis hits upon several of the classic cliches about atheists. For example, he says his morality became whatever was convenient for him. He justified cheating on his wife by rationalizing that since Christianity wasn't true, then God wasn't real and marriage didn't actually exist. It was just a stupid piece of paper with the government. However, that stupid piece of paper is very much real and very much holds you responsible for your actions. And I'm sure that Tim eventually discovered this. Now, as a married atheist myself, I can attest to the fact that lacking a belief in God does not give me the impression that I can cheat on my wife. Seems like Tim was just looking for justification for his immorality. Another example is the connection to academia. Lambesis was studying philosophy in college but switched to religious studies when the band had to go on tour and his school didn't offer correspondence classes in philosophy. Now, he does say that when comparing the religious perspectives to the secular perspectives, the religious perspective didn't make as much sense to him, even in light of the fact that the secular perspective was being underrepresented in his materials. This isn't surprising, I suppose, but he did say that he felt super scholarly at the time and arrogantly justified his stance because my academic pursuit has led me to this. Again, pretty much standard material for theists characterizing atheists. He also attributed his atheism to reading the works of the so-called Four Horsemen of Atheism, Dawkins, Hitchens, Harris, and Dennett. Now, again, this is not surprising since these men have either helped people to espouse an atheistic perspective or at least have provided arguments against the claims of religion. However, he now claims that these men are all experts in their fields of study and brilliant scientists, but that they all fail when it comes to philosophy. And while he was incapable of realizing it at the time, he can now make that distinction. And so we come now to the crux of the issue, which is that Lambesis is now, again, a Christian. He claims that Dawkins and Krauss are spreading the gospel of new atheism in their film The Unbelievers. He insinuates that they are doing this because a God must exist, otherwise they'd have no inspiration for their divine sense of purpose. In addition to this, Lambesis calls William Lane Craig, a peddler of presuppositional apologetics who has gotten schooled numerous times in debates, a brilliant writer. He gushes about Craig's 2 PhDs and how he's a modern equivalent of guys like Josh McDowell or R.C. Sproul, and how he read 1,000 pages of his work just to pass the time. He claims that Craig makes convincing arguments for why a God exists, and then proceeds to use Jesus' claims to prove that Jesus was God. He also proceeds to claim that since his religious education as a child ingrained the idea in his mind that morality is objective and only comes from God, once he stopped believing in God, he believed that objective morality didn't exist and therefore he could do anything he wanted. Now, he at least has the decency to admit that this isn't how most atheists behave and that religious indoctrination was what caused him to enter such a moral decline. And of course, he uses the old cliche of hitting rock bottom before returning to his faith. Now, again, I understand that atheism is just a lack of belief in gods. I don't know what was actually going on inside of Tim Lambesis' head, if he decided that no gods exist or just that the Christian God didn't exist. But what I do know is that for a guy who claimed to have studied religion and atheistic literature extensively, he surely didn't comprehend it if he's right back to Christianity, especially the presuppositional apologetics of William Lane Craig. Lambesis doesn't understand morality, he doesn't understand logic, and he doesn't understand the reasons that Christianity cannot be true. So while Tim Lambesis may have been an atheist by the definition of the word, he surely did not have the necessary justification for his positions on why the God of the Bible doesn't exist. If he truly appreciated the arguments against it, he would not simply have gone back to believing it. And that's why I'm calling bullshit on Tim Lambesis. I am Prototype Atheist. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with anyone else you think would be interested, and subscribe to my channel for future updates. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/prototypeatheist and on Twitter at protoatheist.